Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time before smart thermostats, before central heating, before even the idea of a heated blanket seemed less like science fiction and more like a cruel joke. We're going to imagine ourselves on the American frontier, specifically, how families survived the kind of cold that would make your modern-day polar vortex feel like a gentle spring breeze. You're about to experience a night so cold, so profoundly chilling, that you'll be grateful for every single watt of electricity keeping you cozy right now. And trust me, if you were actually there, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're watching live, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine, if you will, that you are there. The sun, a pale, reluctant disk, has just dipped below the jagged line of the distant tree line, dragging with it the last vestiges of warmth from the frigid air. You stand at the threshold of your humble log cabin, a structure that, from a distance, might look quaint, even picturesque, but up close it's a constant battleground against the elements. The air bites, not just a nip, but a deep, penetrating gnaw that seems to go straight to your bones, making your teeth ache. You pull your threadbare shawl tighter, but it feels less like a garment and more like a suggestion against the encroaching cold. The silence that descends with nightfall is profound, broken only by the mournful sigh of the wind as it whispers through the skeletal branches of the surrounding forest, or the occasional, unsettling crack of a tree contracting in the extreme cold, sounds that, to the superstitious, might be the very voice of winter itself, a chilling lullaby promising misery. This isn't the gentle, quiet dark of a city night, muffled by distant traffic and ambient light. This is the raw, untamed blackness of a world without electricity, where the only illumination comes from a sliver of moon, if you're lucky, or the faint, distant twinkle of stars that seem impossibly bright in the clear, cold air. It's a silence that amplifies every shiver, every creak of the cabin's timbers, every beat of your own anxious heart. As you step inside, the immediate sensation is not one of relief, but of a subtle, almost imperceptible shift from one kind of cold to another. The air inside the cabin is certainly less brutal than the outside, but it's still profoundly, undeniably cold. It's a damp, heavy cold that clings to your clothes, seeps into the very fabric of your being. You can see your breath plume in the air, a ghostly cloud that dissipates slowly, a constant, visual reminder of the battle you're about to fight. This isn't just a low temperature, it's a pervasive presence, a silent, predatory beast that stalks every corner of your small home. Think about your own home right now. You probably have a thermostat set to a comfortable 70 degrees, perhaps even a smart one that learns your habits. You might complain if it drops to 68. Here, on the frontier, your thermostat is your own body, and its only setting is survival. There's no quick fix, no flick of a switch to banish the chill. The cold is a constant, unyielding pressure, pressing in on the thin walls of your cabin, finding every crack, every chink in the rudimentary chinking between the logs. Mainstream historical fact time. While log cabins were robust for their era, providing significantly more protection than a tent or lean-to, they were far from airtight. Many had dirt floors, single-pane windows, if any, and doors that sealed imperfectly, creating numerous pathways for the frigid air to infiltrate. It was a constant, losing battle against infiltration. You can practically feel the cold seeping through the very floorboards, if you even have them, or rising from the packed earth beneath your feet. It's a cold that numbs your toes even through your thickest wool socks, a cold that makes your fingers clumsy as you try to unbutton your coat. The wooden furniture feels like blocks of ice, and even the blankets piled high on your bed offer only a temporary illusion of warmth until your body heat can begin its slow, arduous work. This isn't just about being uncomfortable, it's about a genuine existential threat. The cold isn't just an inconvenience, it's a killer. Frostbite, hypothermia, pneumonia, these aren't just medical terms, they're very real, very present dangers. You understand deep in your bones that a truly cold night, a night where the temperatures plummet to unimaginable lows, could mean the difference between waking up to another dawn and simply not. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? Makes you appreciate that perfectly brewed cup of chamomile tea and your memory foam mattress, doesn't it? And speaking of unimaginable lows, let's talk about the type of cold. It's not just the static chill. Sometimes the wind would pick up, howling like a banshee through the forest, rattling the very foundations of your cabin. This wind, unimpeded by cityscapes or dense forests, would scour the landscape, driving the effective temperature down to levels that are difficult for us to comprehend today. It could carry fine, powdery snow that would find its way through the smallest cracks, dusting your floor with icy crystals even indoors. You might even hear the timbers of your cabin groan and creak under the relentless pressure, sounding almost like a living thing in distress. It's enough to make you wonder if the house itself is just as cold and miserable as you are. Just kidding, mostly. There's also a peculiar phenomenon that some frontier folks reported, a quirky tidbit for you. In extremely cold, still conditions, sound would travel with an uncanny clarity and distance. A distant axe chop, the cry of a lone wolf miles away, or even the subtle creak of ice on a frozen river could be heard as if it were just outside your window. This often led to an eerie, almost supernatural atmosphere on the coldest nights, where the wilderness seemed to whisper its secrets directly into your cabin. Historians still debate the precise psychological toll of such constant, pervasive cold on families, beyond the obvious physical dangers. Was it simply a physical hardship, or did it subtly reshape their very perception of reality and their place within nature? The air itself feels thin, sharp, and dry, making your nose and throat ache with every breath. Your skin feels tight, stretched, and every exposed patch begins to prickle and burn. It's a sensation that never truly leaves you throughout the long, dark hours. Even if you manage to avoid outright frostbite, the constant, low-grade discomfort is a form of torture in itself. You learn to move with a certain stiffness, to conserve every ounce of precious body heat. Walking across the cabin, even a few steps, feels like an expedition, each breath a conscious effort. It's a far cry from debating whether to wear a light jacket or a sweater to grab your morning latte, isn't it? As the night deepens, the cold seems to intensify, becoming more aggressive, more insistent. It's not just a temperature, it's a living, breathing entity, a silent adversary determined to claim its due. You can feel its tendrils reaching, searching for any weakness, any lapse in your vigilance. It wraps around the cabin, a suffocating blanket of ice, pressing in, testing the strength of your walls, the integrity of your fireplace, and most importantly, the resilience of your spirit. You listen to the subtle sounds of the house, the faint, almost imperceptible drafts that hint at the cold's relentless pursuit, the tiny pops and groans of the wood as it battles the temperature extremes. Every sound is a reminder of your vulnerability, of the vast, indifferent wilderness just beyond your thin wooden shell. This is the stage upon which the drama of survival will play out over the coming hours, a silent, desperate struggle against an enemy that never sleeps, never tires, and never shows mercy. As the biting cold of winter truly sets in, you find your gaze drawn, almost instinctively, to the walls around you. This isn't some grand, insulated modern home with triple-pane windows and a furnace humming quietly in the basement. Oh no. This is your humble, often drafty, yet utterly indispensable log cabin. It's a rudimentary structure, yes, a testament to necessity and elbow grease, but make no mistake. These walls, these rough-hewn logs, are your primary, your only defense against the frigid, unforgiving elements outside. They are the fragile membrane between life and a very cold, very lonely end. Their construction wasn't just a matter of building. It was a matter of survival, a painstaking craft where every joint, every gap, held the potential for comfort or catastrophe. You remember the sheer, back-breaking labor that went into every single log. It wasn't just about felling a tree, it was about selecting the right tree. You looked for straight, healthy specimens, often pine or oak, sometimes chestnut if you were lucky enough to find a stand before the blight took hold. You'd mark them, then with axe and saw, you'd begin the arduous process of bringing them down. There's a certain primal satisfaction in feeling the vibrations travel up the handle of your axe as the steel bites deep into the timber, the rhythmic thwack 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 echoing through the silent forest. Then came the limbing, stripping off branches until you had a clean, sturdy trunk. And then the real fun began, hauling them. No heavy machinery here, just muscle, ingenuity, and perhaps an ox or a trusty horse if you were truly blessed. You'd slide them, roll them, leverage them, inch by agonizing inch, to your chosen cabin site. It was a workout that would make any modern gym enthusiast weep, and you did it daily, often with the looming threat of winter pushing you faster. You almost missed the feeling of your muscles screaming after a long day of hauling, a testament to a day well spent, a day closer to having a roof over your head. Almost. Once the logs were on site, the real artistry began, the notching. This wasn't just stacking wood, it was fitting it together like a giant, rustic puzzle. You'd cut precise notches into the ends of each log, allowing them to interlock snugly without the need for nails, which were a precious commodity anyway. There were various styles: the saddle notch, the dovetail, the half notch, each with its own advantages for stability and, crucially, for minimizing gap. A well-executed dovetail joint, for instance, would shed water and pull tighter as the log seasoned, becoming a surprisingly robust and weather-resistant corner. You recall the painstaking measurements, the careful cuts with your broadaxe, shaping the wood with an almost surgical precision. One wrong cut, and you'd have a gap that would let in the wind and snow like an uninvited guest. The goal was to make them fit so tightly that a squirrel would have to get a mortgage to squeeze through. Though, let's be honest, those little rascals always found a way. But even with the most precise notching, logs are rarely perfectly straight, and they certainly don't fit together seamlessly like factory-milled lumber. This brings us to the unsung hero of frontier cabin warmth: chinking and daubing. This was the process of filling every single crack, every crevice, every tiny gap between the logs. And it was a constant battle. Imagine trying to seal a sieve with mud and moss. That's essentially what you were doing. For chinking, you'd use thin wooden splints, small stones, or even pieces of scrap wood wedged tightly into the larger gap. Then came the daubing, the messy, hands-on part. You'd mix clay, mud, straw, grass, animal hair, even manure sometimes, whatever binding material you could find, into a thick, sticky paste. You'd then plaster this concoction over the chinking materials, forcing it into every last opening. You can still feel the cold, wet mud squishing between your fingers, the earthy smell clinging to your clothes. It was a dirty job, but it was the job. This wasn't a one-and-done kind of deal, either. Oh no. As the seasons changed, as the logs dried and shrank, as the frost heaved and the rain washed, the chinking would crack, crumble, and fall out. It was a perpetual maintenance task, a never-ending war against the elements trying to sneak their way in. You'd spend countless hours patching and redaubing, especially as winter approached, knowing that even a small crack could mean a chilling draft that would steal the precious heat from your hearth. Mainstream historical fact: the consistent reapplication of chinking and daubing was perhaps the single most critical and labor-intensive aspect of maintaining a warm frontier cabin, often consuming more time than the initial log felling once the structure was up. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the difference between a cozy night and a frostbitten one. Then there's the roof. Simple, often a single-pitched or gable design, typically made of split logs, bark, or hand-split wooden shake. While it kept the rain and snow out, its insulating properties were often minimal. You might throw a layer of sod on top for a little extra warmth, But even then, heat loves to rise and escape, and your roof was usually its easiest path to freedom. Below, the floor was often just packed earth, cold and damp, or perhaps a rough puncheon floor made of split logs laid flat side up. Later, if you were fortunate, you might have milled planks, but even those offered little true insulation from the frozen ground beneath. You learned quickly that a good thick rug or a few animal hides on the floor weren't just decorative, they were essential. And the windows, or rather the lack thereof. Early cabins often had no windows at all, just small openings that could be shuttered tightly against the cold. If you were lucky, you might have a tiny pane of glass, a truly luxurious item that had traveled hundreds of miles. More commonly, you'd stretch greased paper or animal bladders across the opening, letting in a faint, diffused light but offering little in the way of insulation. You learned to live by the rhythm of the sun, knowing that as dusk fell, those tiny openings would be sealed tight, plunging the cabin into a deep, comforting, but sometimes oppressive darkness, broken only by the flickering firelight. It was a trade-off, light for warmth, and in winter, warmth always won. Historians still argue whether the average lifespan of a frontier cabin before significant repairs or abandonment was truly just a decade or if many endured much longer with constant, dedicated maintenance. What is clear, however, is that these structures were living entities, constantly settling, shifting, and demanding attention. One quirky tidbit. Some early settlers would intentionally build their cabins with a slight lean or slope, particularly on the roof, to facilitate better snow shedding or to direct rainwater into a collection barrel, showcasing an early, intuitive understanding of passive design principles, though often driven by pure necessity rather than architectural theory. Imagine building your house knowing it should lean a bit. It's like designing a car that's supposed to have a flat tire. So, as you settle in for the night, you can almost hear the subtle creaks and groans of the logs, the soft whisper of the wind trying to find its way through the chinking. These walls aren't just wood. They're a monument to grit, ingenuity, and an unyielding will to survive. They are the silent, steadfast guardians that stand between you and the relentless, suffocating cold of the frontier night. And for that, you are eternally, profoundly grateful. As the cabin walls, humble though they might be, stood guard against the biting wind, you knew that your true battle for warmth began not at the frontier's edge, but right within your four walls. You turn your gaze inward, to the very heart of your home, the pulsating core that defied the encroaching chill, the fireplace. It wasn't merely a place to boil your beans or bake your bread. Oh no, it was the literal beating heart of your existence, demanding a level of constant vigilance that would make a modern-day smart home enthusiast weep with despair. There was no app for this, no pre-programmed thermostat, just you, a pile of logs, and the relentless cold. Imagine, if you will, stepping into a world where your entire life revolved around a single, perpetually hungry maw of stone and flame. This wasn't some decorative gas fireplace you turn on with a switch for ambient. This was the source. It radiated heat, yes, but also a profound sense of responsibility. You could feel its warmth on your face as you knelt, but often, your back would be chilling from the drafts creeping in from the far corners of the cabin. It was a constant negotiation with physics, a desperate attempt to coax enough warmth from a roaring inferno to keep your extremities from aching. The very air around it shimmered, a visible testament to the energy it poured into the small space, pushing back against the invisible, insidious tendrils of frost. The crackle and pop of burning wood was the cabin's true soundtrack, a lullaby of survival that soothed your nerves even as it reminded you of the unceasing work required. Each snap and hiss was a tiny victory against the cold, a promise of warmth that had to be continuously renewed. You learned to read the fire like a book. The lazy, licking flames of a dying ember, the eager roar of a fresh log catching, the smoky, sulking glow that meant trouble was brewing in the flue. This wasn't just about heat, it was about light too. In a world without electric bulbs, The dancing firelight painted the cabin walls with shifting shadows, transforming familiar objects into fleeting, monstrous shapes, then back again. It was a natural, mesmerizing show, far more captivating than anything you'd find on streaming services today, primarily because your life literally depended on it. Maintaining this lifeline fire was an art form, a daily ritual passed down through generations. It started the moment you woke, often before dawn, to the lingering chill that had crept in despite your best efforts. Your first task, even before stretching the stiffness from your joints, was to assess the embers. Had they held through the night? The hope, the prayer, was that a few glowing coals remained, nestled deep within the ash. If they had, it was a small victory, saving you the arduous task of starting a new fire from scratch. You gently raked them together, blowing softly, steadily, until a tiny spark caught, then another. This was where the bellows came in, that simple contraption of wood and leather, puffing air into the nascent flame, coaxing it to life. It felt like breathing life into the cabin itself, a primal act of creation. Then came the feeding. Not just any wood would do. You needed a mix. Dry kindling to get things going, smaller sticks to build up the heat, and then the mighty, seasoned logs that would burn slow and long, releasing their stored energy for hours. Mainstream historical fact. Hardwoods like oak, maple, and hickory were highly prized on the frontier for their density and high heat output, burning much longer and hotter than softer woods like pine, which, while easier to split and quick to ignite, also burned away much faster and produced more creosote. You learned this quickly, often through trial and error, freezing through a night fueled by inadequate wood. The constant chore of bringing in more wood was relentless. It was a never-ending cycle. Gather, chop, stack, bring in, feed. You always kept a supply near the hearth, carefully stacked to dry further, ready for its fiery destiny. The tools of the hearth were an extension of your hand, the long-handled poker to prod and rearrange logs, coaxing more air into the heart of the flame, the shovel to scoop out the endless accumulation of ash, the tongs to carefully place a stubborn log or retrieve a stray ember. And the ash, oh, the ash! It was a constant byproduct, a gray, powdery testament to the fire's appetite. You couldn't just let it pile up indefinitely. Daily, sometimes twice daily, you'd shovel out the cooled ash, careful not to disturb any lingering embers that might reignite. Where did it go? Into a metal bucket, perhaps, to be scattered in the garden as a soil amendment, or even saved for lye soap making. Nothing was wasted on the frontier, not even the remnants of your warmth. But the fireplace wasn't just a benevolent provider, it was also a dangerous beast requiring constant respect. Sparks could fly, embers could escape, and a moment's inattention could turn your life-saving heat source into a roaring inferno that consumed everything you owned. You learned to keep a watchful eye, especially when children were near, or when the wind howled outside, threatening to send gusts down the chimney. And the chimney itself was a whole other beast. Creosote, that tar-like residue from burning wood, built up inside the flue, a silent, unseen threat. If it caught fire, it could send flames shooting skyward, igniting the roof and turning your sanctuary into a funeral pyre. Chimney fires were a terrifying reality, often announced by a roaring sound like a freight train and plumes of black smoke. Clearing the chimney, usually by dropping a weighted brush down from the roof or pulling a bag of chains through from below, was a dreaded, dirty, and essential task, often done only when absolutely necessary, or when the smoke started backing up into the cabin. Here's a quirky tidbit. While most families relied on flint and steel, or borrowing embers from a neighbor if their fire went out, some households, particularly in more isolated areas, reportedly kept a special fire stick or a carefully tended, smoldering log wrapped in damp cloth to carry embers for miles, ensuring they always had a way to restart their hearth without the arduous process of striking a spark. This, fire borrowing, was a testament to the community spirit and the absolute necessity of a continuous flame. As night approached, the vigilance intensified. Banking the fire was a crucial ritual, perhaps the most important of the day. You couldn't just let it burn out. The goal was to preserve a glowing core of embers that would last until morning, saving you from the truly miserable task of starting a fire from scratch in the pre-dawn chill. This involved carefully pushing the remaining logs and coals to the back of the hearth, then covering them with a thick layer of ash. This smothered the flames, slowing down the combustion process, allowing the coals to smolder for hours, a glowing promise of warmth in the morning. It was a delicate balance. Too much ash and the fire would die, too little and it would burn through too quickly. You learned the precise amount through experience, often waking to a dead hearth and a very cold lesson. Historians still argue whether the prevailing design of frontier fireplaces, often massive and inefficient, was a result purely of available materials and simple construction methods, or if it reflected a deeper, perhaps even inherited, understanding of thermal dynamics that was lost to later generations. Regardless, its inefficiency was something you lived with every day. The vast majority of the heat went straight up the chimney, but what little it radiated into the room was everything. It warmed the stones of the hearth, which in turn radiated heat slowly into the room even after the flames died down. You'd often find yourself drawn to it, sitting close, almost reverently, soaking in the last vestiges of warmth before crawling into your cold bed. So, as you lay there, listening to the gentle hiss of the banked fire, you understood its immense power. It was your chef, your lamp, your laundry dryer, your water heater, and above all, your shield against the unforgiving cold. It was a demanding master, yes, requiring constant attention and endless fuel, but it was also your most loyal companion, the very pulse of your survival. And as the last embers glowed faintly through the ash, you offered a silent thank you for its tireless service, knowing that tomorrow, the demanding dance would begin anew. The crackle of the fireplace, that comforting, living sound, wasn't a gift of nature on the frontier. It was a tireless, back-breaking chore, a daily battle waged against the encroaching cold. You see, that pulsing core of warmth we talked about? It demanded constant vigilance, yes, but more than that, it demanded a relentless, never-ending supply of fuel. Imagine, if you will, that your entire life revolved around a single, non-negotiable subscription service, the wood delivery. Except, you were the delivery person, the logger, the hauler, and the stacker, all rolled into one weary, often frost-nipped package. This wasn't just about keeping warm. It was about fueling the very lifeline of your existence. Every single day, from the crisp, misty dawn to the fading light of late afternoon, the thought of the hearth's hunger gnawed at you. It wasn't a choice. It was a primal directive. The forest, your vast, indifferent neighbor, was both your provider and your adversary. You trudge out, axe hefted, often with a saw slung over your shoulder, the crisp air biting at your exposed skin, your breath puffing out in white clouds. The snow, if it had fallen, crunches underfoot, a rhythmic counterpoint to the thud of your boot. You're not just looking for any wood. You're looking for dry wood, for fallen trees, for dead limbs that haven't yet succumbed to rot. Green wood, while abundant, burns poorly, spits and hisses, and produces more smoke than heat. A frustrating, inefficient waste of precious time and effort. It's like trying to get a good internet connection in the wilderness. You know it's possible, but it's going to take a lot of patience and the right kind of signal. The search itself could be an odyssey. Sometimes, a promising stand of timber might be a good distance from your cabin, meaning a longer haul. You become an expert in dendrology by necessity, identifying the best burning woods. Oak, maple, hickory, dense hardwoods that burn long and hot, throwing off glorious, sustained heat. Pine, while easier to cut and lighter to carry, burns fast and furious, a flash in the pan that leaves you needing more, sooner. It's the difference between a quick sugar rush and a slow-release energy bar. You learn to recognize the telltale signs of a good find, a downed tree, perhaps brought low by a recent storm, or a thick branch snapped off a sturdy trunk. Your eyes scan the forest floor, your mind constantly calculating the effort versus the reward. Every fallen log represents a potential day or two of warmth, a brief reprieve from the chill. Once located, the real work began. The rhythmic thwack of the axe against wood became the soundtrack of your winter days. It's not just about brute strength. It's about technique, about finding the grain, about the satisfying split that cleaves a log into manageable pieces. Your muscles ache, your hands, despite thick gloves, grow numb with the cold and the vibration of the impact. Sometimes, a knot in the wood, stubborn and unyielding, would mock your efforts, refusing to split cleanly. You might spend what feels like an eternity wrestling with one particularly obstinate piece, muttering under your breath, convinced it was put there by mischievous forest spirits just to test your resolve. It's a bit like trying to assemble flat-pack furniture with a missing screw, infuriatingly close to completion, yet impossibly far. Historians still argue whether the efficiency of frontier fireplaces truly justified the immense labor involved in fueling them, with some suggesting that the sheer volume of wood required made them a less-than-ideal solution, despite their necessity. But for you, the debate was moot. It was the only game in town. After the chopping came the hauling. Imagine, for a moment, having to transport all the fuel for your home heating system, by hand, from a few miles away, every single day. No delivery trucks, no natural gas lines. Just you, a sled you cobbled together, or perhaps a sturdy wagon if you were fortunate enough to own a draft animal. Each log, heavy and cumbersome, had to be loaded, secured, and then dragged or pulled back to the cabin. The path back was often uphill, through snow drifts, or over uneven, frozen ground. You lean into the harness, or grip the handles of the sled, your back screaming in protest, your legs burning with effort. The cold air fills your lungs, and despite the exertion, a chill still seems to permeate your very bones. This daily trek was your cardio workout, your strength training, and your mental fortitude test, all rolled into one grueling session. Except there was no gym membership fee, no personal trainer to cheer you on, and absolutely no option to skip leg day. The sheer volume of wood needed was staggering. A typical frontier family, relying solely on wood for heat and cooking, could consume anywhere from 20 to 40 cords of wood over a single winter. To put that into perspective, a cord of wood is a stack 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, and 8 feet long, roughly the size of a small car. Imagine stacking 20 to 40 small cars worth of wood, by hand, and then burning them, one log at a time. It's an almost unimaginable feat of sustained labor. And once the wood was at the cabin, the work wasn't over. It had to be stacked, carefully, often under an overhang or in a lean-to, to keep it as dry as possible. Wet wood, as mentioned, was a poor fuel, and a good stack allowed air circulation, further drying the logs and making them more efficient for burning. A well-stacked woodpile was a point of pride, a visible testament to your diligence and foresight, a bulwark against the coming cold. It was like your personal, prepaid insurance policy against freezing. There's a quirky tidbit about this relentless chore. Some frontier families, especially those in very cold regions with limited timber, would learn to utilize every single part of the tree, even the smaller branches and twigs, for kindling or to supplement their main fire. They might even gather and dry animal droppings or peat if wood became incredibly scarce, a testament to their ingenuity and desperation. The idea of waste not, want not truly took on a new, urgent meaning when your survival depended on it. So, as night fell and the stars began to prick the inky blackness above your cabin, you'd haul in armloads of the precious fuel. Each log you placed on the embers of the hearth was a silent prayer, a tangible link to the warmth and life within. The scent of burning wood, smoky and resinous, filled the cabin, a scent that was inextricably linked to survival, to comfort, to the very rhythm of your frontier life. It was a smell that promised another night of warmth, another day of life, another step towards the distant, hopeful promise of spring. And as the fire settled into its steady glow, you could almost hear it whispering its thanks, a warm, crackling lullaby, reminding you that for tonight, the relentless battle had been won. As the fire dies down to embers, casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls, your thoughts drift from the warmth of the hearth to the promise, or perhaps the challenge, of your bed. Forget your plush memory foam mattresses and Egyptian cotton sheets. Your frontier bed is a testament to ingenuity, necessity, and a whole lot of scratchy layers. It's not just a place to rest. It's a meticulously constructed fortress against the invading cold, a sanctuary that, for all its rustic simplicity, demands respect and careful preparation. You approach the bed, which is likely a simple wooden frame, perhaps with ropes strung across it to support the mattress. These rope beds were a common sight, and you'd often hear the rhythmic creak of tightening the ropes before bed, a frontier lullaby, perhaps, or just a reminder that your bed was literally held together by tension. The mattress itself? Not inner springs, but a ticking bag stuffed, perhaps, with dried corn husks, straw, or even dried leaf. Every rustle as you move is a reminder of nature's bounty, repurposed for your comfort or, at least, for your elevation off the freezing floor. It's a far cry from a pillow top, and sometimes you wonder if you're sleeping on a cloud or a very lumpy hay bale. Oh, darling, you might quip to yourself, this lumpy straw mattress is just like that 5-star resort we never went to. The rustic charm is simply to die for. But the real magic, the true defense against the relentless grip of winter, lies in the layers you pile upon this humble foundation. Your bed becomes less a bed and more a nesting doll of warmth, each piece a vital component of your survival system. First, if you're lucky, there might be a rough linen sheet, perhaps homespun and coarse, offering a thin barrier between you and the next layer. Then come the wool blankets. These aren't the soft, fluffy throws you see in modern catalogs. Oh no. These are heavy, dense, and often incredibly scratchy. They're made from the wool of your own sheep, sheared, carded, spun, and woven by hand, often right there in your cabin. Each thread is imbued with hours of labor, a silent prayer against the chill. You pull them up, one after another, feeling their substantial weight settle over you, already beginning to trap pockets of air that will soon warm. And then, the pride and joy of any frontier home, the quilts. These aren't just decorative items. They are masterpieces of insulation, born of necessity and community. A mainstream historical fact is that quilting bees were incredibly common on the frontier, not just as social gatherings for women, but as vital events for producing the essential bedding needed for survival. Neighbors would gather, sharing scraps of fabric from worn-out clothing, flour sacks, or whatever precious textiles they could get their hands on. They'd cut, piece, and stitch these fragments into intricate patterns, often imbued with personal histories and family lore. Beneath the colorful patchwork top, there would be a layer of batting, often cotton, wool, or even old rags, and then a backing fabric. The 3 layers would be meticulously stitched together, creating thousands of tiny air pockets, each a miniature thermal barrier. You might have 2, 3, or even more of these precious quilts on your bed, each one telling a story, each one a testament to countless hours of patient, loving labor. You smooth them down, admiring the patterns in the dim light, knowing that every single stitch is working to keep you alive tonight. Finally, the furs. These are the heavy hitters, the ultimate insulators. Perhaps a bear's skin, thick and shaggy, or several deer hides, painstakingly tanned and softened. Maybe even smaller furs like rabbit or fox, sewn together into a larger throw. These aren't just for show, they are incredibly effective at trapping heat. You pull the heavy fur pelts over the top of the quilts, feeling their weight press down, sealing in the warmth. The initial chill of the fur on your skin quickly gives way to a profound sense of security. It's like being cocooned in the very wilderness you're trying to survive, but from a position of relative safety. Now, about those shared beds. Space was at an absolute premium in a small log cabin, and individual beds were a luxury few could afford. So, more often than not, your bed is shared. Perhaps with your spouse, certainly with your children, and sometimes even with more distant relatives or travelers seeking shelter. Body heat, remember, is a precious commodity. Huddling together isn't just about emotional comfort, it's a practical, life-saving strategy. You arrange yourselves, perhaps with the youngest children tucked safely in the middle, benefiting from the warmth radiating from all sides. Personal space? You might chuckle under your breath. That's a concept for folks in the future with rooms bigger than our entire cabin. It's a tight fit, no doubt, but the collective warmth is undeniable, a shared furnace against the biting cold that seeps through the chinks in the logs. Getting into this layered nest is a ritual in itself. You strip down to your innermost layers, perhaps a wool nightshirt or just your undergarments, ready to dive into the cold sheet. The first contact is always a shock, a gasp of icy air on your skin as you slide between the layers. But you burrow quickly, pulling the blankets and furs up to your chin, curling into a tight ball. You feel the initial, sharp chill, but then, slowly, deliciously, the warmth begins to build. Your own body heat, trapped by the layers, starts to radiate back, warming the straw mattress beneath you and the woolen cocoons above. The air around your face might still be frosty, and you might even see your breath in the dim light, but beneath the covers, a pocket of warmth is steadily growing. You might even find a bed warmer, a pan with a long handle filled with hot coals, has been slipped between the sheets earlier, a quirky tidbit of frontier comfort that offers a fleeting moment of localized warmth before you settle in. The sheer number of layers, the weight of the quilts and furs, can be almost comical. You feel like a human burrito, swaddled so tightly you can barely move. Turning over is an expedition, a minor feat of engineering involving shifting pounds of fabric and fur. But it's a comfortable weight, a reassuring pressure that speaks of protection. You listen to the sounds of the night, the wind howling outside, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft breathing of those sharing your bed. Sometimes, the straw mattress rustles as someone shifts, or the heavy wool blankets make a soft whoosh sound. Historians still argue whether the frontier bed, for all its practical warmth, truly offered a restful night's sleep in the modern sense, or if people simply adapted to a more intermittent and less deep sleep cycle due to the constant environmental challenges. But as you drift off, you can feel the warmth spreading, chasing away the last vestiges of the day's chill. You are safe, for now, within your layered fortress. Each stitch, each fiber, each shared breath contributes to this fragile, vital warmth, a silent promise of survival until the sun returns. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fading orange and bruised purple, a palpable shift descends upon your humble cabin. It's not just the light that's changing, it's the very air, growing sharper, biting at any exposed skin. You feel it in your bones, a deep ancestral chill that whispers of the long, dark hours ahead. This isn't just dusk. It's a siren call signaling the urgent commencement of nightfall's rituals, a precise choreography of survival designed to usher your family through the formidable gauntlet of the coldest nights. Every action, every preparation, is a deliberate step away from the encroaching, silent threat of the deep freeze. The first, and arguably most critical, of these nightly rites centers, as always, around the heart of your home, the fireplace. During the day, it's a bustling hub of activity, a source of light and warmth for cooking, heating water, and simply existing. But as night draws in, its purpose shifts. No longer a roaring beacon, it must become a carefully managed ember, a sleeping dragon of warmth, poised to reawaken with minimal effort in the frigid dawn. This is the art of banking the fire, a skill passed down through generations, honed by necessity and the unforgiving lessons of a truly dead hearth on a sub-zero morning. You begin by carefully pushing the remaining coals and embers together into a compact mound, usually towards the back of the hearth. This concentrates the heat. Then, with a practiced hand, you gently rake a layer of ash, often from the previous day's burn, over the top. This isn't just any ash. It's a fine, insulating blanket, suffocating the flames just enough to slow combustion to an almost imperceptible crawl, yet allowing enough oxygen to prevent the fire from dying completely. Think of it like putting a slow cooker on its lowest setting, but instead of a delicious stew, you're trying to preserve a living, breathing warmth. Sometimes, a special, slow-burning log, often called a fire dog or backlog, is strategically placed against the banked coals, providing a steady, smoldering heat throughout the night. It's a delicate balance, a whispered conversation between wood, air, and ash. Too much ash, and the fire will be extinguished, leaving you with nothing but cold, lifeless coals come morning. Too little, and it burns itself out too quickly, leaving you in a similar icy predicament. Many a frontier family has awoken to the dreaded silence of a cold hearth, a testament to a misjudged banking, and the immediate, bone-chilling realization of the extra labor required to coax new life from a sparkless pile of wood. Historians still argue whether the primary method of banking varied significantly by region or if a universal technique predominated across the vast frontier. Regardless, the goal was always the same: to find a few precious embers, glowing like tiny red eyes, when the first sliver of dawn finally appeared. The whole process is a quiet, meditative act. You can hear the subtle hiss and crackle as the ash settles, the air in the cabin growing stiller, heavier with the scent of wood smoke, and a lingering warmth that promises to cling to the walls for a few more hours. It's a moment of profound responsibility, knowing that the comfort, and indeed the very safety, of your family rests on the success of this nightly ritual. Imagine the feeling of accomplishment when you wake up, shivering, and see those faint, orange glows. It's like finding a winning lottery ticket, except your prize is not having to spend an hour in the pre-dawn darkness trying to rub two sticks together, or worse, finding that the tinder is damp. Honestly, you probably wouldn't have even considered trying to rub two sticks together. You'd be more likely to send the youngest, most expendable child out to borrow a hot coal from a neighbor, if one was even close enough. Just kidding, mostly. Probably. Once the fire is safely banked, its precious warmth locked away for the night, attention turns to another, equally vital, and perhaps less romantic, nightly preparation: the chamber pot. Ah, the unsung hero of frontier sanitation. As charming as the idea of a midnight stroll under the stars might sound in a romantic novel, the reality of stepping outside a warm cabin into a truly frigid, wind-whipped night to answer nature's call was, shall we say, less than appealing. It was a surefire way to invite frostbite or worse, a debilitating illness. So, the chamber pot, or thunder mug, as it was sometimes rather aptly nicknamed, became an indispensable fixture of the frontier bedroom. You retrieve it from its discreet corner, perhaps from under a bed or behind a chest. It might be a simple ceramic pot, cold and smooth to the touch, or perhaps a more rustic wooden bucket lined with tar or pitch. You make sure it's empty from the previous night's use, its contents having been unceremoniously and quickly tossed outdoors earlier in the day and positioned in an easily accessible, yet still somewhat private, spot. This is especially important when multiple family members are sharing a single room, or even a single bed. The thought of fumbling around in the dark, tripping over a sleeping sibling, just to find the pot adds another layer of minor anxiety to the nightly routine. The very presence of the chamber pot is a stark reminder of the lack of modern plumbing, of the constant, intimate relationship with the necessities of life and their disposal. It wasn't glamorous, but it was practical, and in the harsh realities of frontier life, practicality trumped propriety every single time. It's a bit like having an emergency power generator for your bathroom, only it's a porcelain bucket and you have to manually empty the tank every morning. Fun times. Beyond these two primary rituals, other, smaller preparations unfold as the cabin settles into its nocturnal rhythm. You move through the cabin, your steps hushed, checking latches on the heavy wooden door, ensuring that no stray gust of wind can force its way in. Any cracks around windows or doors that might have opened wider during the day are stuffed with rags or scraps of fabric, a constant battle against the insidious seep of cold air. You might bring in a small armload of kindling and smaller logs, ensuring that dry, easily ignitable fuel is right at hand for the morning's fire starting. There's no worse feeling than waking up to a banked fire and realizing all your kindling is outside, buried under a fresh layer of snow. Candles and oil lamps, precious commodities, are extinguished one by one, plunging the cabin into deeper shadow, broken only by the faint, comforting glow from the banked hearth. This saves on the precious tallow or oil, but it also minimizes the risk of accidental fire, a terrifying prospect in a wooden cabin miles from any help. You might hear the quiet rustle as children are tucked more snugly into their shared beds, an extra blanket or a fur thrown over them, their breathing soft and even in the gathering dark. Perhaps a small pail of water is brought inside, ensuring it won't freeze solid overnight, a small convenience for the morning. One fascinating tidbit from frontier history is the practice of some families using a warming pan, a long-handled, lidded pan filled with hot coals from the fire to pre-warm their beds before climbing in. Imagine that comforting wave of heat as you slip under the covers, a brief respite from the general chill of the room. It's a small luxury, born of ingenuity and a desperate need for warmth. And speaking of small luxuries, if you were lucky enough to have a cat or a small dog, they often found their way onto the foot of the bed or snuggled close, adding their own modest contribution of body heat. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement, really. Warmth for them, warmth for you, and a built-in alarm clock if they started purring too loudly. As these rituals conclude, a profound quiet descends. The sounds of the day, the chopping of wood, the clatter of cooking, the chatter of voices, fade into the background, replaced by the subtle creaks of the cabin, the whisper of the wind against the logs, and the rhythmic breathing of your sleeping family. You pull your own layers closer, feeling the rough wool against your skin, and settle into the nest of blankets and furs. The air still holds a chill, but the immediate, piercing cold has been held at bay. You've done your part. The fire is banked, the chamber pot is ready, and the cabin is as secure as you can make it. Now, all that's left is to endure the long, dark hours, listening to the wind howl its mournful song, and waiting for the first, faint promise of morning. It's a testament to the resilience of those who faced such nights, a quiet, nightly triumph over the elements. As the last embers of the fire reluctantly surrendered to the encroaching chill, and the final preparations for the long, dark hours were complete, your body, already weary from the day's relentless battle against the cold, yearned for the solace of your bed. But on the frontier, your bed wasn't just a personal sanctuary, it was a communal lifeboat, a strategic huddle where the most precious commodity of all, body heat, was shared, conserved, and celebrated. This wasn't about personal space, my friend. This was about pure, unadulterated survival. Imagine, if you will, the scene. Your humble cabin, perhaps a single room, or at most two. The air inside, despite your best efforts with the fire, has begun to bite, carrying the sharp scent of wood smoke and damp earth. You move towards the sleeping arrangements, which are almost certainly not the individual, sprawling havens of comfort we know today. Forget your king-sized mattresses and your memory foam toppers. Here, a bed might be a rough wooden frame or simply a pallet on the floor, piled high with whatever meager insulation you possessed: straw, corn husks, animal furs, and those precious patched quilts. And onto this communal warmth generator you pile in, not one by one, but often 2, 3, 4, or even more. Historians still argue whether the constant close proximity fostered deeper family bonds or led to increased friction and a longing for privacy that was rarely granted. But what is undeniable is the sheer practicality of it. You see, your body is a remarkable little furnace, constantly radiating warmth. In a modern, centrally heated home, that warmth dissipates into the air, easily replaced by your HVAC system. But on the frontier, in a cabin where every crack in the log walls seemed to whisper the wind's icy secrets, holding on to that warmth was everything. And the most efficient way to do that? To literally become a human blanket, a living, breathing, radiating mass of warmth. So, you slip under the heavy layers, perhaps a scratchy wool blanket, followed by a bare fur, then a quilt made from scraps of old clothing, each piece a testament to frugality and necessity. The first touch of the cold sheets makes you gasp, but then, as you settle in, the warmth of your family members begins to envelop you. Perhaps your youngest sibling is tucked snugly between you and your mother, their small body a surprisingly potent source of heat. Your father might be on the other side, his broad back a warm wall against the cabin's outer edge. You learn to spoon, to intertwine, to press your limbs against those of your kin, maximizing every square inch of contact. It's the original cuddle puddle, designed not for Instagram likes, but for sheer, unadulterated survival. Think of it as a frontier family's smart thermostat, powered entirely by organic matter. No batteries required, just a willingness to share your personal warmth. And yes, sometimes the symphony of shared breathing might have included a few unconventional instruments. Let's just say frontier air fresheners were not a booming industry, and sometimes the aroma of a tightly packed family, after a day of chopping wood and tending to livestock, was robust. But in the face of fingers and toes threatening to succumb to frostbite, a little olfactory adventure was a small price to pay. The warmth blooms slowly, emanating from the center of your human nest. You can feel the subtle tremors of a sibling's breathing, the steady, comforting thrum of your parents' heartbeats. The air immediately surrounding your huddle becomes a microclimate, a pocket of warmth that defies the bitter cold just inches away. You might even feel the cold air seeping in from a poorly chinked log, a stark reminder of the thin barrier separating you from the unforgiving night. But within the huddle, you are safe, cocooned. This practice of communal sleeping was incredibly common. It wasn't just for the very poor. It was a practical necessity for almost everyone living in small, often one-room cabins, especially during the brutal winter months. With limited space and even more limited heating options, consolidating bodies into one or two large beds was simply the most logical and effective way to stay warm. It was a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of frontier families, a simple solution to a profound challenge. Forget your modern, personal bubble. On the frontier, your personal bubble was roughly the size of your closest relative's elbow, and you were grateful for it. There's even a quirky tidbit about the extreme measures some took. While less common for humans to share beds with large livestock, on the absolute coldest nights, some families might bring smaller, more manageable animals, like a cherished dog or even a very small piglet, inside the cabin. Not necessarily in the bed with everyone, but certainly inside the shared living space, adding their own modest contribution to the ambient temperature. It was a desperate measure, perhaps a bit smelly, but every degree counted when life was on the line. Imagine waking up to the gentle snuffle of a piglet by your feet, a true frontier alarm clock, perhaps. The gentle pressure of bodies around you, the shared exhalations, the subtle shifts as someone adjusts their position, these become the rhythms of your night. You learn to sleep through the occasional nudge, the soft snore, the inevitable tangle of limbs. If you ever wanted to know if your brother was running a fever, you didn't need a thermometer. You just needed to be the one spooning him from behind. Instant diagnosis, no copay, though perhaps a slight increase in your own internal temperature. It was a system born of necessity, refined by generations of harsh winters. As the hours crawl by, you might drift in and out of sleep, but the warmth remains, a constant, reassuring presence. You are not alone against the cold. You are part of a living, breathing, heat-generating entity. This shared warmth was more than just physical comfort, it was a profound psychological anchor. It was the tangible manifestation of family, of community, of interdependence. In the deepest, darkest hours of the coldest nights, wrapped in the warmth of your kin, you felt the strength of your collective survival, ready to face whatever the dawn might bring. You might imagine, as the sun dips below the frost-rimmed horizon, that stepping inside your humble log cabin would offer a complete reprieve from winter's relentless assault. Oh, if only it were so simple, my friend. The truth is, the cold didn't just visit your frontier home, It lived there, a permanent, chilling resident that seeped through every chink in the logs, every crack in the floorboards, and every breath of air. The warmth from your roaring hearth, bless its smoky heart, often struggled to reach beyond a few feet, leaving the corners of your cabin in a perpetual state of frigid dread. So, what did you do? You certainly didn't strip down to your nightclothes. No, my dear listener, indoors was just another battleground, and your armor was your clothing. You see, the concept of an indoor outfit distinct from an outdoor outfit was, frankly, a hilarious fantasy in the deep frontier winter. Your clothes were less about fashion statements and more about survival cocoons, a second skin designed to trap every precious molecule of body heat. You wore layers, and then you wore more layers, and then you probably contemplated sewing on a few more layers, just for good measure. Think of it like a human onion, each peel a defense against the permeating chill. The primary hero in this sartorial saga was, without a doubt, wool. Not the soft, plush, ethically sourced merino wool you might find in a high-end outdoor store today, oh no. This was homespun wool, often coarse, scratchy, and imbued with the authentic scent of sheep, wood smoke, and a certain unwashed frontier essence. Imagine the painstaking process. The sheep were shorn, their fleece carded, brushed until the fibers aligned, then spun into thread on a spinning wheel, a rhythmic hum that was a constant soundtrack to winter life. Finally, that thread was painstakingly woven into fabric, often on a simple loom, resulting in a thick, dense cloth that, while perhaps not a delight against sensitive skin, was an absolute champion at trapping warmth. Your long johns, your shirts, your skirts, your trousers, many were made of this homespun wonder. It was the original base layer, only it was also the mid-layer, and sometimes, if you were lucky, the outer layer too. You wore wool next to your skin, despite the itch, because its natural crimp created tiny air pockets that insulated you, even when damp from sweat or melted snow. It was a trade-off, comfort for survival. And survival, as you've no doubt gathered by now, always won. Beyond wool, animal skins were your next best friend. These weren't just for the rugged trappers or hunters. Even the most domestic frontier family understood the incredible insulating power of fur and hide. Maybe you had a deerskin vest, tanned imperfectly but thick and windproof. Perhaps a rabbit fur lining sewn into a coat, or even a bear skin draped over your shoulders like a personal, mobile blanket. These furs, often crudely prepared, retained some of the wildness of their former owners. You might catch a whiff of earth, musk, or even a faint echo of the forest. They added a primal, heavy warmth, a tangible connection to the wilderness that surrounded you. Imagine trying to do chores, bending and stretching, with the weight of a half-cured bear hide on your back. It was less about nimble movement and more about simply being warm enough to move at all. And let's talk about patched fabrics. This wasn't a fashion statement. It was a testament to extreme resourcefulness. Clothes were worn until they were threadbare, then patched and patched again, with any available scrap of fabric. A knee worn through on your wool trousers? A piece of an old blanket or a discarded flour sack might be sewn on. An elbow frayed on your homespun shirt? Another patch. Your garments became a living tapestry of your family's history, each patch a visible scar of wear and tear, a story of endurance. You didn't throw things away. You extended their lives indefinitely. Frankly, if you saw someone on the frontier with unpatched, pristine clothing in the dead of winter, you'd probably assume they were either incredibly wasteful or had just arrived from some inexplicably warm land. Historians still argue whether the sheer volume of clothing worn indoors impeded daily tasks more than it aided warmth, but one thing is certain: you moved like a bundled-up toddler, waddling through your day, each motion a little more cumbersome. Even your head wasn't left exposed. Woolen caps, often knitted by hand, were worn indoors to prevent heat loss from your scalp. And your feet? Ah, your feet. Layers of thick, hand-knitted wool socks were essential, often worn inside moccasins or crude leather boots that were less about style and more about keeping your toes from turning blue. The floor of your cabin, even near the hearth, was a direct conduit for the earth's cold. Stepping on it barefoot was an act of masochism reserved for the truly desperate. So, your feet remained swaddled, even when you were just shuffling from the sleeping loft to the fireplace. This constant layering meant your personal scent profile was robust. With limited water, no central heating, and the sheer effort involved in washing and drying clothes in sub-zero temperatures, garments were rarely laundered in winter. You wore them for days, weeks, sometimes months, accumulating the unique aroma of wood smoke, body odor, and whatever you'd been cooking or working with. It was the frontier equivalent of a personal biodome, a self-contained environment of warmth and essence. One quirky tidbit. Some frontier accounts suggest families would even wear their outdoor coats to bed on the very coldest nights, simply because removing them would mean a catastrophic loss of trapped heat. Imagine the commitment to warmth when your pajamas are your full winter outerwear. So, as you settled into your evening, perhaps you'd add yet another shawl, or pull a thick, patched blanket tighter around your shoulders. Your body became a furnace, and your clothes, a series of intricately woven and layered ducts, designed to keep that heat from escaping. The goal wasn't just to feel warm, it was to be warm enough to prevent the insidious creeping cold from sapping your strength, dulling your mind, or, God forbid, leading to the dreaded chilblains or frostbite. Every fiber, every stitch, every animal hide was a conscious choice, a defensive measure against a world that was trying its very best to freeze you solid. It was a constant, low-grade battle, fought not with muskets, but with wool, ingenuity, and a stubborn refusal to let the cold win. The biting cold outside isn't just a physical presence, it's a constant, gnawing hunger deep within you. It's a primal call from your very core, demanding fuel, demanding heat. Because out here, food isn't just about satisfying a craving or enjoying a meal. Oh no, my friend. In the relentless grip of a frontier winter night, what you put into your body becomes nothing short of a vital, internal defense mechanism. It's the difference between shivering through the hours, your teeth chattering a rhythm of despair, and generating enough warmth from within to actually make it to dawn. Imagine your body as a small, struggling furnace. The colder it gets outside, the more furiously that furnace has to burn to maintain a core temperature that keeps your organs from simply slowing down. And what fuels that furnace? Calories, my dear listeners. Lots and lots of them. Warm, hearty meals and hot beverages aren't just comforting, though the comfort they offer is a balm to the soul in such bleak times. They are, first and foremost, the very kindling, the logs, the coal that keeps your internal fire blazing. As dusk begins to paint the sky in hues of bruised purple and icy gray, your thoughts inevitably turn to the evening meal. The scent of whatever is simmering on the hearth, or bubbling in the cast-iron pot hanging over the flames, becomes the most intoxicating perfume in the world. It's not the aroma of a gourmet feast, mind you. You won't be finding any artisanal cheeses or organically grown microgreens out here. Your menu is dictated by necessity, by what could be hunted, gathered, or preserved. Think less Michelin star, more survival star. Though, if you asked a hungry pioneer, they'd probably rate a good venison stew higher than any fancy modern dish. Probably. Unless it was a very bad stew. The staples are simple, yet incredibly effective. There's often a bubbling pot of stew, thick with whatever meat was available: venison, rabbit, maybe even a bit of precious salt pork, and root vegetables like potatoes, carrots, or turnips, if you were lucky enough to have a root cellar that hadn't frozen solid. The fat content is key here. That glistening layer of grease on top of the stew? That's not a sign of unhealthy indulgence. It's pure, unadulterated energy. Your body craves fat in the cold, because it's a slow-burning, long-lasting fuel source. It provides more than twice the calories per gram of carbohydrates or protein, and in these conditions, every calorie counts. You'd scrape the last bit of fat from the pot, not out of greed, but out of a deep, instinctual understanding that it was keeping you alive. Then there's the ever-present corn. A true workhorse of the frontier diet, corn could be ground into meal for porridge, baked into cornbread, or simply boiled. A bowl of hot cornmeal mush, perhaps sweetened with a bit of molasses if you had it, or just eaten plain, was a fundamental part of staying warm. It's a simple carbohydrate, offering quick energy to kickstart your internal furnace, while the fats and proteins in the stew provided the sustained burn. You eat until your belly is distended, a feeling that in this context isn't uncomfortable, but reassuring. It's a physical manifestation of your body's preparedness for the long, cold night ahead. And what about the drinks, you ask? Oh, the hot beverages. They weren't just for comfort, they were a direct delivery system for warmth. Imagine wrapping your frost-nipped hands around a steaming mug of something, anything hot. The warmth radiates through your palms, up your arms, and a sense of immediate relief washes over you. Water, of course, was always heated. But often it was much more. Hot herbal teas, brewed from foraged plants like sassafras, mint, or even dried berry leaves, offered not only warmth but also a hint of flavor and often some perceived medicinal properties. A sassafras tea, with its distinctive root beer-like aroma, might have been seen as a tonic for winter ailments, while also simply being a vehicle for hot liquid. Then there was the coffee. Now, this wasn't the fancy Arabica bean brew you might be sipping from your insulated mug right now. Oh no. Frontier coffee was often made from roasted grains, barley, rye, or corn or chicory root. It lacked the true caffeine kick, but it offered the ritual, the dark color, and most importantly, the heat. It was a simulacrum of the real thing, but when you're shivering in a drafty cabin, even a poor imitation of coffee is a luxury. More like hot mud than coffee, Martha. You might grumble to yourself, but you'd still down every last drop. Historians still argue whether the average frontier diet, often heavy on salted meats and grains but lacking in fresh fruits and vegetables during winter, provided adequate nutrition for sustained cold exposure, especially given the prevalence of diseases like scurvy. But what is undeniable is the sheer caloric intake needed. Sometimes, a small measure of firewater, whiskey, or rum might be consumed. While it gives an immediate sensation of warmth, creating a flush on your skin, the actual physiological effect of alcohol is to dilate blood vessels, which can actually cause your core body temperature to drop over time. So, while it might have been a temporary psychological boost, or a way to numb the biting cold, it wasn't a true thermogenic aid. It was more of a comfort than a fuel, in the purest sense. But comfort, in those times, was a commodity as precious as any food. The preparation of these meals was as much a ritual as the eating. You would spend hours over the hearth, stirring the stew, turning the roasting meat, the warmth of the fire a welcome embrace. The smells that permeated the cabin of simmering broth, roasting meat, baking bread, were more than just pleasant, they were the scent of survival. These aromas became deeply intertwined with the feeling of security and warmth. You watched the pot intently, feeling the heat from the fire on your face, the simple act of cooking becoming a meditative practice. As you spoon the thick, steaming stew into a wooden bowl, the heat instantly transfers to your hands, a small comfort before the first mouthful. You bring the bowl to your lips, the steam curling around your face, and take that first mouthful. The rich, savory broth, the tender chunks of meat, the soft vegetables, it all slides down, a wave of warmth spreading through your chest and stomach. You can almost feel your internal furnace roaring to life, the chill receding from your extremities. It's a profound, satisfying feeling that goes beyond mere taste. It's the feeling of your body being replenished, re-energized, ready to face the long hours of the night. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, knowing that this fuel has to last. One quirky tidbit about frontier diets. Some families, particularly those in areas with plentiful game, would sometimes consume certain animal organs, like the liver or brain, not just for variety, but for their concentrated nutrients and fat. Bear fat, for instance, was highly prized for its caloric density and was used not only in cooking but sometimes even rendered down for oil lamps or medicinal salve. Imagine a hearty bear stew, steaming in the flickering firelight, the rich, almost sweet aroma filling the cabin. It's a far cry from your modern-day takeout, but to a frontiersman it was gourmet. The simple act of chewing and swallowing, the warmth in your belly, the feeling of fullness, it all contributes to a sense of well-being that is absolutely critical for mental fortitude. When your body is adequately fueled, your mind is better equipped to deal with the psychological strain of constant cold and isolation. The thought of a warm meal at the end of a freezing day could be the very thing that kept you going through arduous chores. It wasn't just about avoiding starvation. It was about maintaining the energy to chop more wood, fetch more water, mend clothes, and simply endure. This sustenance wasn't just a meal. It was a strategic intervention, a daily battle waged and won against the cold, one hearty mouthful at a time. And as you finish the last drop of your hot beverage, feeling the warmth spread through you, you know you've just armed yourself for another night's vigil. As the mercury plunges, and the very air inside your humble cabin begins to bite with a chill that seems to find every crack and crevice, your focus narrows. It's not just about the general cold anymore, it's about the specific, insidious threat to your hands, your feet, and even your ears. These are your extremities, the delicate outposts of your body, and they are terrifyingly vulnerable to the cold's most agonizing assault: frostbite. You know the signs. That initial, almost pleasant numbness, a deceptive quiet that steals over your fingers or toes, often after you've been outside for too long, or perhaps even just sitting still inside a particularly drafty corner of the cabin. Then, as circulation struggles to return, comes the deep, burning ache, the pins and needles that feel like 1,000 tiny ice shards pricking your skin. And if it progresses further, well, you try not to think about the blackening flesh, the irreversible damage, the grim necessity of amputation that no frontier doctor, if you were lucky enough to even find one, could truly prevent. Prevention, you learn quickly, is the only cure out here. So you pay special, almost obsessive, attention to these vulnerable parts. Your hands, constantly working, constantly exposed. You might be stirring a pot, mending a tear, or even just trying to hold a book, but the cold seems to seep into your very bones. You find yourself clenching your fists, tucking them under your armpits, anything to keep the warmth in. But that's not enough for the long haul. Enter the lard. Ah, the unsung hero of frontier survival, derived from pigs you've painstakingly raised or bears you've bravely hunted. It's a simple, greasy substance, often kept in a small crock near the hearth, where it remains just pliable enough to work with. Before you venture out, or even just before settling down for a long, cold night, you take a generous dollop. It feels well, it feels like rubbing pig fat on your hands. A little sticky, a little slick, but you don't complain. You rub it meticulously into your fingers, over your knuckles, up your wrist. The idea isn't just to moisturize, though it does help with the chapped, cracked skin that is a constant companion in winter. No, the primary purpose is to create a thin, protective barrier, a layer of fat that helps insulate and repel moisture. It's like a primitive, organic waterproof glove, helping to keep your natural body heat from dissipating too quickly and preventing direct contact with the biting cold. You might even laugh a little to yourself, remembering how fancy city folk use perfumed creams, while you're here, smelling faintly of rendered animal fat. It's a smell that becomes synonymous with safety. After the lard, come the coverings. For your hands, mittens are far superior to gloves. Gloves, with their individual finger compartments, allow too much surface area for heat to escape. Mittens, however, keep your fingers huddled together, sharing warmth like a tiny, furry democracy. These aren't factory-made wonders. They are often homespun, knitted from coarse, undyed wool, sometimes even lined with rabbit fur or scraps of deerskin. They are thick, bulky, and sometimes a little scratchy, but they are your frontline defense. You might have several pairs, one for working outside that gets wet and stiff, and another, slightly cleaner pair for inside the cabin. The constant cycle of drying and warming these mittens near the fire is a ritual in itself, a small, steaming offering to the gods of warmth. Then there are your feet. Oh, your poor feet. They bear the brunt of every journey, every chore, every step on frozen ground. They are also notoriously difficult to keep dry, especially when trudging through snow or slush. And wet feet, are cold feet, and cold feet are a direct invitation for frostbite. So, the protection of your feet is paramount. Your first line of defense here is the humble sock, or rather socks. Plural. You wear layers of them. The innermost might be a thin, soft linen, but the subsequent layers are almost invariably wool. Thick, hand-knitted wool socks, sometimes 2 or 3 pairs at a time. These aren't the soft, merino wool wonders of today. They are often made from the wool of your own sheep, spun and knitted by hand, coarse and perhaps a little itchy, but incredibly effective at trapping air and wicking away what little moisture they can. The smell of damp, unwashed wool is just another sensory hallmark of winter life. You pull them on, one after another, feeling your feet swell inside your boots, but you welcome the bulk, knowing it means insulation. Before the socks, another application of lard or, perhaps more commonly for feet, tallow. Tallow, rendered beef or deer fat, is often harder than lard but serves a similar purpose. You rub it onto your soles, between your toes, over your